Hello everyone, thank you for stopping by my channel, home of the Vaulted Earth. In this video we're going to be discussing geosynchronous satellites. And just like orbiting around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour, this video here is going to be one heck of a ride. The first thing I want to tell you is this. You do not know where you live. No, I don't mean your hometown's name. I'm telling you that you do not know where you and the rest of your fellow human beings live. You think you live on a bald planet, spinning, orbiting, wobbling, rotating, shucking and jiving wildly through outer space. But that is wrong, and you are mistaken. The second thing is this. There is no space. You heard that right. There is no such thing as outer space. It does not exist. Some of my viewers already know, but for those of you who do not, I need you to listen clearly and listen well. Space does not exist. There is no universe. There are no planets. There are no galaxies. All that exists any and everywhere is the vault or dome-covered realm we call the Earth, and heaven, where the Creator God of the Holy Bible exists, which is, as claimed, directly above us. That is all. There is nothing else. I know you may now have many questions, especially about my sanity, if you're still even watching this video. See my other videos to get a better understanding as to why millions of people on the Earth now believe the very thing I just expressed. However, for now, we'll stick to the region or lack of region of space and the impossibility of orbiting Earth, seeing as how there is no space. And besides the International Space Station, the second most popular invention we're told that orbits our planets is satellites. In fact, some of you may think a satellite is delivering the internet you're using this very moment to watch this video. However, you would be wrong. And if you have the courage to listen to this video to the end, you will come to only one of two conclusions. Number one, there are no satellites orbiting the Earth, and there never was and never will be. Or number two, you will come to the conclusion, at the very least, if you finish this video, that something is obviously very suspicious about satellite technology, the origins of it. The whole history of the invention stinks to high heaven, outer space even. Well, if there was such a thing as outer space. I am Jonathan Benjamin Blackheart Summers. Thank you for joining me. Now let's get on with removing those lies the enemy has used to blind you from the truth of Almighty God. We'll have you seeing with new eyes in no time. Just follow me. Now I will warn you, and I should have done this earlier, but I'm going to speak very quickly throughout this video. I'll slow down when the inflection is warranted, but I've got a lot to cover and I've got a job to go do, so let's get on with it. Try to keep up. I first want to draw your attention to these planes. These are high altitude planes and balloons you will see by Google and Facebook to give internet to parts of the world that satellites cannot reach. Ask yourself, why would there be any part of the world that cannot have satellite internet? I'll tell you right up front, because I don't like anyone sneaking up on me. It's because satellites don't exist. See that? That's your satellite. That's an underwater cable. They run all across the ocean from continent to continent, and is how almost all communication is transmitted on the Earth. That's not a conspiracy. You look up undersea cables and check the statistics. That is the very invention that is transmitting all the data over the Earth and doing the job, quote unquote, satellites do for us. Satellites are propelled by rockets to their orbits. Usually the launch vehicle itself is a rocket lifting off from a launch pad on land. Some satellites are launched at sea, where no one can see them, from a submarine or a mobile maritime platform, or aboard a plane. Let me just repeat that. They're saying they're launching satellites into space from an airplane. Alright. Space airplane? No. Airplane. Space plane? No. Spacecraft? No. An airplane. Okay. So, in 1928, Herman Potocnik, 1892 to 1929, he published his sole book, The Problem of Space Travel. I know a problem with it. There is no place to travel called space. The rocket motor. Das Problem der Beförderung des Weltraums. The rocketing motor. He described the use of orbiting the spacecraft for observation of the ground and described how the special conditions of space could be useful for scientific experiments. Yes, the conditions are very, very special. Now see the image? Project Loon, Google. Why is Google one of the biggest companies in the world now? Why are they using balloons to transmit internet? Project Loon. They probably chose that name because they realized their users must be lunatics to believe that they can launch a balloon for internet. But this company does not have the ability to afford satellites. Oh man, have they pulled the wool over our eyes. It is not a conspiracy. Google Project Loon. Use Google to Google Project Loon. Use your internet that is coming through a cable to research on Google's internet providing balloon. Okay? If that doesn't spark some kind of an interest there, I don't know what to say. Now, in a 1945 Wireless World article, the English science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke described in detail the possible use of communication satellites for mass communications. Hear what I said now. 1945, no one had been to space yet, no one had been to the moon, if you believe that. That was in 69. So in 45, many years earlier, a science fiction writer, Arthur C. Clarke, described how to use satellites for mass communication. He suggested that 3 geostationary satellites would provide coverage over the entire planet. Now keep in mind, satellites did not exist. This is a science fiction writer. He came up with the idea in one of his books. Now this is where you really need to start listening and using your critical thinking. Keep a memory of the things I've said, because I cannot hold your hand nor your thoughts to lead you where you need to be. You must pay attention. Listen to this. In May 1946, Project RAND, that's R-A-N-D, had released the preliminary design of an experimental world-circling spaceship, which stated, quote, a satellite vehicle with appropriate instrumentation that can be expected to be one of the most potent scientific tools of the 20th century. The United States had been considering launching orbital satellites since 1945 under the Bureau of Aeronautics of the United States Navy. The United States Air Force Project RAND eventually released the above report, but did not believe that the satellite was a potential military weapon. Rather, they considered it to be a tool for science, politics, and propaganda. In 1954, the Secretary of Defense stated, quote, I know of no American satellite program. My goodness, end quote. I cannot believe that. In 1954, the Secretary of Defense stated, quote, I know of no American satellite program. But in 46, they've released preliminary designs. Okay. That's very telling. And we've got much more to say. In 54, Project RAND released, quote, scientific uses for a satellite vehicle. Now, these things did not exist. Not for the satellite vehicle, for a satellite vehicle, they said. Written by R.R. Carhart. This expanded on potential scientific uses for satellite vehicles and was followed in June 55 with, quote, the scientific use of an artificial satellite by H.K. Coleman and W.W. Kellogg. In the context of activities planned for the International Geophysical Year of 57-58, the White House announced on July 29, 55 that the U.S. intended to launch satellites by the spring of 58. This became known as Project Vanguard. On July 31st, the Soviets announced that they intended to launch a satellite by the fall of 57. If you think Russia now, was the Soviet Union, if you think the Soviet Union and the United States ever really going to come to blows with some nuclear war, you've been deceived. Those people are friends. They always have been. They are now still in 2017. Following pressure by the American Rocket Society, the National Science Foundation, and the International Geophysical Year, military interest picked up, and in early 55, the Army and Navy were working on Project Orbiter, two competing programs, Armies which involved using a Jupiter C rocket and the civilian Vanguard rocket of the Navy to launch a satellite. At first they failed, of course they did. You always fail first, just like SpaceX did. That way when you do the unbelievable, it's a bit more believable. But if you do it first try, it looks a little bit fishy. That's why you fail once, and then the people never doubt it. Start thinking, my friends. Finally, 3 months after Sputnik, the project succeeded. Explorer 1 became the United States' first artificial satellite on January 31st, 1958. Now, the first early satellites were constructed as, quote, one-off designs, quote. Are you telling me that it's a one-off design and it's going into a place you've never been with such peculiar conditions such as outer space, and you don't have a consistent working model, okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially considering how very expensive satellites are reported to be. Back to the article. With growth in geosynchronous satellite communication, multiple satellites began to be built on a single model platform called satellite buses. The first standardized satellite bus design was HS-333 GEO ComSat, launched in '72. The largest artificial satellite currently orbiting the Earth is International Space Station. Alright, now let's read about the Space Surveillance Network. The United States Space Surveillance Network, SSN, a division of the United States Strategic Command, has been tracking objects in Earth's orbit since '57. Now listen. When the Soviet Union opened the space age with launch of Sputnik, since then, the SSN has tracked more than 26,000 objects. Now you think about what we just read, the largest artificial satellite, it's got humans in it. Americans and Russians and other countries. I don't remember the other countries. But they've got humans in there. I know some of them are British. I remember some of them British boys. I do not like them. I don't like any of those guys. They are all liars, all Masons, all pledging allegiance to the Dark Lord. Called the Lightbringer. Kind of funny, right? Oxymoron there. The largest artificial satellite currently orbiting the Earth is the International Space Station. But there's 26,000 objects flying around at 17,000 miles an hour, and they're not worried that it might rip a hole in that tin can they say is floating up there and die. They're always so happy. Oh, come on, man. Do you believe that? The SSN currently tracks more than 8,000 man-made orbiting objects. The rest have re-entered Earth's atmosphere and disintegrated. How convenient that you cannot see them go up, and when they come back down, as reported, you cannot see them again because they just disappear. Now I want to read a couple facts about the International Space Station. My tongue's getting stuck on that today for some reason. Alright, it says this is from around 2016, these figures, okay? They're a little bit out of date, a couple months. It's been in orbit, how many days? 18 years and 2 months it's been in orbit. How many days has it been occupied? 16 years and 2 months. So it's just by itself for 2 years. Number of orbits as of July 2016, 101,081. That's a lot of days, and there's some strange figures there, and it kind of reminds me of Neil deGrasse Tyson saying that, you know, Earth is 14, or not Earth, but the universe, 14.6 billion years old, but there's starlight that's over 15 billion years old. Did you know that? Let me tell you something very plainly. When you are the only person who can see these things, and you are the only person who can write and publish these things, and when you're the only person who can report back on these things and tell you what they've seen, let's call it a monopoly. How do we know anything they tell us? I know when I look with my telescopes and my cameras, there is no space. All I see is exactly what the Holy Bible told me, which is stars, a sun to rule the day and a moon to rule the night, two great lights, and water. Yes, yes, you can see water above, just like it says, the firmament separates waters above from waters below. That's all you can really see. People that have filmed the ISS, that was easier to say. Whew, I'm going to start saying that instead of International Space Station. People who have filmed the ISS, people who were once big believers in space. And I was too, man. I wanted to be an astronaut. I grew up in Florida, man. Cape Canaveral, like pumped up. Let's watch some rockets and everything. Nah, man, it doesn't exist. They filmed it and they looked at it and they said, this doesn't look right. It looks like a darn hologram. Why is it transparent? Why can you kind of see through it? The shapes don't look right. The orbital path of it and the trajectory of it and the angle of the ISS doesn't match up. So it's just not good when you're the only guy that can see it and you're the only guy that will report it. It makes real easy for these people to lie. And when these people tell you they do not believe in God and are actually adverse and become irate when you try to say, hey, I believe God might exist, who confess to believe that God of the Bible is the creator of all we see. Why would you choose one particular thing, one particular religion, one particular being that men and women believe in, and choose to ridicule that one and to make fun of the people who believe it. You do not hear Neil deGrasse Tyson making fun of Muslims. I guarantee it. Nor Bill Nye, the liar guy. They won't do it. Because the God of the Bible is the God. He is the Almighty God, El Shaddai. Pardon me, I'm digressing. I just become so infuriated when these sun-worshipping Masons, yes, they worship the sun. Why do you think there is Sunday when the whole world keeps Sabbath now? When Sabbath is seventh day? Why do you think that these people tell us we orbit the sun when we know the sun is a small light compared to what they tell us that is so much larger than the earth and 93 million miles away? They are liars, okay? You look up Albert Pike. These people are liars. That's funny, we just saw a picture with these darn Masons in front of that fake, as the flat earth a-hole would say, tweaker trash can house or whatever. These people are liars, man. Okay, I'm going to wrap it back up, get back onto this large satellite called the ISS. Naked eye. The ISS is visible to the naked eye as a slow-moving bright white dot because of reflected sunlight, and can be seen in the hours after sunset before sunrise when the station remains sunlit but the ground and sky are dark. You're a liar. The ISS takes about 10 minutes to pass from horizon to another. You're a liar. And will only be visible part of the time because of moving into or out of Earth's shadow. There is no shadow of the Earth. You are a liar. Well, what about the moon? Sometimes the moon is like, that's why there's a curved shadow on the moon. Do you know what a half moon is? It's a straight line. I'm not going to put a picture in here. Just do some research for yourself, would you? The moon shadow has nothing to do with the Earth. I have so many videos. Go look at my moon videos, please. Goodness, I'm riled up, man. Go look at my moon videos. I got one that's called Earth Not a Ball, Confessions of the Moon, something like that. And I show the moon and the sun in the same frame over and over in the middle of the day, high in the sky, and the moon is illuminated or not illuminated at the same parts all through the night. I document it with longitude, latitude, so many things. Don't give me that. That is a lie. It has nothing to do with Earth's shadow. There is no Earth's shadow. Fools, man. These people, oh man. These people make me so angry. If you believe that anything to do with the moon has anything to do with Earth's shadow or the sun, just go yourself outside and look with your own eyes. You don't need any binoculars, no camera, no telescopes, nothing. All you need is a darn brain. Just go and look, okay? And if you, I mean this, are literally blind, ask a friend to look that you trust and tell him or her, what is it that you see, my friend? They will tell you, I see the sun in the sky and the moon in the sky, and yes, it is a quarter moon or a half moon and it doesn't matter whether it's daylight or dark. Liars. I'm not going to read about the ISS anymore because I'm about to flip out. This is the point. Satellites are fake. Now, let me show you why. One, you've seen no real pictures of a satellite, and you cannot find any. Let's talk about what it costs to build and launch a satellite. Satellites are not cheap business. They cost a lot of money to design, construct, launch, and monitor. How much would it cost to design, really, when we have already had them since the 40s, they say, or 50s, they say, right? Something doesn't add up, pal. Just how much money do they cost? If you have at least $290 million in your account, that money can go into making a satellite that can track and monitor hurricanes. At about another $100 million more if you want a satellite that carries a missile warning device. What makes satellites so expensive? I'm going to blow this out of the water for you guys. You stay with me. If you've made it this far, just stay with me now. Some of the factors that drive the cost of satellites are the equipment and materials used to build them. Transponders alone, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to maintain. Who goes up and maintains a satellite? Who goes up and catches it? You're a liar. While bandwidth cost per megahertz is priced at a minimum of $3,500 a month, running a satellite at 36 megahertz bandwidth will cost over $1.5 million a year. There are also other gadgets and equipment that have been built into satellites in order. Gadgets and equipment. Very technical, NASA. Thank you. Built into the satellite in order for it to perform so as it's intended to function. These can include computers, computer software, and cameras. I don't think there are any satellites with cameras, NASA. or JAXA or ESA or SpaceX? If there are satellites with cameras, why don't you turn one of them suckers around that's supposedly orbiting the Earth and give us a 24-hour view of our home? Because that home does not exist. Because I told you in the beginning, you don't know where you live. You do not live on a spinning, wobbling, country line dancing, bingo playing ball. You don't. You live on a vaulted earth, just as the Most High God told you. That is it. These people are liars. Another factor that contributes to the expenses associated with satellites is that they're absolute fraudsters. Is the cost of putting one into orbit. Pardon me. It is estimated that a single satellite launch can range in cost from a low of $50 million to a high of $400 million. So it is possible, as we just read, just to get a satellite and get it into space can cost you $390, $400, about $700 million. And that's not the cost of it actually operating at $3,500 a month. Launching a space shuttle mission can easily cost $500 million, although one mission is capable of carrying multiple satellites and sending them into orbit. Also to be considered as the cost of satellites is its maintenance. After getting one into orbit, it has to be monitored from a ground facility, which will require manpower. They've really got you guys hustled. Satellites are also not impervious to damage or downtimes, but the ISS is. Furthermore, if things don't go well during a launch, a multi-million-dollar endeavor can either end up in pieces or sustain damages that will cost more money to repair. Some of the top satellite firms in the U.S. are Hughes, Boeing, Ball Aerospace and Technologies Corp, and Lockheed Martin. That's really cute, Ball Aerospace. Okay, my friends, now we're going to bring it home, okay? There was a Satellite Act passed back when John F. Kennedy was the president. We're going to discuss some disagreements of the passing of the act. Democratic Senator Russell B. Long of Louisiana said of the act, quote, "When this bill first started out, I thought it was as crooked as a dog's hind leg, period. I am now convinced that that would be a compliment. This bill is as crooked as a barrel of snakes." Quote. The American Telephone and Telegraph Company argued that using space for communications was just a modern representation of the submarine communications cables currently in use. Did you hear that? The American Telephone and Telegraph Company, they said that the use of space communications is just a modern representation of the submarine communication cables already in use. They told the truth. AT&T proposed joint ownership of all of the communication satellites with control based on the system facilities, but since AT&T had a majority of the world communications, this proposition was opposed by the other communication companies. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, proposed that the 10 companies join together in a program, but this was put down with antitrust legislation. The compromise allowing the bill to pass was that there would be government regulation on the communication industry. So now that the U.S. government was involved, there was no more antitrust. Okay. The United States Congress made it so that all companies registered by the FCC had non-discriminatory access to the satellite systems. This would allow competition to develop among the companies, thus preventing trust from forming. The whole thing was a trust already. The United States government, including the President, NASA, and the FCC, were all to maintain certain duties to monitor the communication satellites. The President was to observe every aspect of the development and operation of the satellite systems. He is also responsible for providing arrangements with foreign participation. NASA was designated as a technical advisor for the FCC and the Communications Corporation to the extent that it would aid the nation. NASA, always there for the nation, and the government too. NASA was to receive reimbursement for the services it rendered. I'm sure they were reimbursed handsomely. The largest burden on regulation falls on the FCC. The FCC was deemed responsible for making sure the competition is present and that small businesses would be able to participate. Well, that's $700 million a satellite. I'm sure they're participating well. The Act created a board of directors to oversee regulation of the Act. There are also to be 15 members of this board, 3 appointed by the President, 6 chosen by public stockholders, and the remaining 6 chosen by communication carriers that are authorized by the FCC. So we got the government regulating things, we got the FCC regulating things, we got the... Do you see what's happening here? It's a good old boy system, and it's all the rich boys. The board of directors is to control the public satellite systems. Public satellite systems. its underwater cables. Stock shares for the board were to be sold for $100. This is back in the day now. This would provide finances for the board. Like, oh my chicklets. It's a monopoly and it doesn't even exist. The act was very ambiguous about the responsibilities of the regulators and the direction that the companies would go. However, the act provided a good start toward global communication systems. Section 301 of the act provided Congress the right to appeal, alter, or amend. This would be necessary in order to make clear the future regulation done by the committees established by the act. Now let me tell you something very plainly right here. There were no satellites. No one had been into space. Understand what I'm saying. Comments after the act passed. The year after the act passed, President Lyndon B. Johnson reported to Congress that, quote, act is progressing well in light of the complexities of the problem. Quote, the problem is there was no damn satellites in the first place. It had not even existed. They'd only come into the mind of a science fiction writer. Yet at this point, little had actually been accomplished. There we are. There had been no communication satellites launched, and only some research had been conducted to provide moving forward. President Johnson's next report to Congress was on March 17, 1967. Here he reported that, quote, the Communications Satellite Act of 1962 has brought mankind to the threshold of a full-time global communication service to which all nations of the world may have equal access, end quote. At this time, much had been accomplished towards a global communication system. ComSat had been joined by 17 nations for the creation of Intelsat, International Telecommunications Satellite Consortium. 55 nations had joined Intelsat, which was a consortium established to provide an intergovernmental owning of communication satellites. Intelsat was created at a time when private companies were unwilling to invest in satellite technology shortly after the passing of the Communications Satellite Act of 1962. Lyndon B. Johnson is saying things are going great, but at this time, there had been no satellites launched and barely any research. They don't exist, folks. ComSat. The ComSat, C-O-M-S-A-T, corporation was created by the Communications Satellite Act of 1962 and incorporated as a publicly traded company in 1963. The primary goal of ComSat was to serve as a public, federally funded, that's an oxymoron, public, federally funded, corporation intended to develop a commercial and international satellite communication system press. Now, although the corporation was government regulated, it was equally owned by some major communications corporations and independent investors. Now, perk up and wake up and listen, okay? Open your eyes and your ears. This is where we're going to bring it home and put the nail in this puppy, alright? And she will not get back up. So we have a technology that was created in a literal work of fiction, a fictional novel by a science fiction writer, Arthur C. Clarke, in 1945. 17 years before the Communications Satellite Act was ever passed by a government agency. The bill was passed for an object that literally did not even exist. I think it would be a common conception to create a product, test it in real-world conditions, see how it fares, then, after it proves itself to perform as intended, then we contact those governing bodies and bureaucracies that regulate the communications technologies while marketing shares and expounding on incentives to invest to potential investors and backers with ties to telecommunications companies. In this case, the U.S. government, private investors, and telecommunication companies passed a bill for a product that did not even exist. No satellite had ever been in space at this time. Still hasn't, but I'm just keeping it real with the mainstream media. The technology had not been proven to work yet. It had not been shown to even work poorly, let alone well enough to form corporations and pass legislation for an imaginary invention. It's clear that the investors, the U.S. government, and the telecommunications companies were supremely confident that satellite technology was gonna function in a precise manner in an unfamiliar medium, space, and perform well enough that satellite technology would no doubt become the global influence we are all taught that it is now. Do you not find it strange that no one said, hey, let's try one of these out in space first before we do all this stuff? They told you the end immediately after telling you the beginning, knowing that the middle, how we actually get from start to finish, or how a satellite actually will work according to their fake space and godless cosmology, really made no difference because the public trusted their American government implicitly. And I can understand why the public would have such trust, meaning if I told you the U.S. government, the country who just saved us from the Nazis, all the big telecommunication companies, who I know can obviously broadcast radio, and all the wealthy investors. Evidently, another smart group they must be. They're rich after all. If I told you that this group of people, companies and governments, were all joining forces to create a more sophisticated telecommunications network that uses a new technology they have all been working on, you would have no reason to doubt the claim as a common citizen. After all these types would not waste all this time and money on a hoax or a fictional idea. These are serious people that play no games, men of intelligence, character, and a sterling work ethic. Men like these are of the stock which create their own inventions and form companies. Men like these are those who become fabulously rich. Men like these are those who rule the world. These types would not even give a second thought to investing all their time, effort, and money into a device that they know doesn't even exist. Would they? They would not risk their reputations on a device that has not yet been created, let alone proven to work. They would be hesitant to throw their hat into the ring on a project they knew had an extremely high probability of failure. Yet they did. Why? Because these men knew there was absolutely zero risk of the satellite communications system failing. Keep in mind, it did not yet exist. Publicly even. They knew it would work exactly as the public had been told. How could they know? Especially with the strange environment of space being the destination of this new device. The answer is actually crystal clear. They knew satellites would be an amazing success story because that's all it would ever be. Just a story. And in the world of fiction, anything is possible. However, an even more interesting realization is this. I'm communicating to you that satellite communications do not exist and that a satellite is a device created by a writer of fictional stories, stories that communicate ideas to the public via books, radio, and television, which are owned by the telecommunication companies, and that these companies, whose way of generating revenue is communication, simply communicated to the people of the earth that they have a new and ingenious way of communicating, and all the world believes it because that is what these entities communicated, that is, told, is now their reality. And that is all satellites ever were, have been, or will be. Nothing more than a tale, a tall tale. Get it? Tall because space is very high? Ha ha ha! Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But in all seriousness, the satellite's hustle is ingenious. All they had to do was tell you it was real. And then to the world, they now were real. All my life, up until a few years ago, satellites existed, orbiting the Earth in space. This is such a unique deception. We were told they are real, so they literally are. Well, in our minds. Perception is reality, right? Well, we know better now. Perception is only the very beginning of understanding of every matter. But you did not perceive and then form an opinion in stone, allowing it to affect your worldview henceforth. You perceive, and then you test your perception against and alongside your other senses, understandings, logic, and knowledge base, all while asking yourself, is this possible? What proof or evidence of this have I seen and examined? And who stands to gain in this endeavor? Well, in this case, the very most obvious and apparent answer would be the telecommunications companies. However, there are certainly many others that benefit from this lie. One way I learned years ago when determining the truth of a matter that you may only be allowed to view from a distance is to follow the money. When you see what space agencies charge companies to launch a satellite into space, it will become very apparent the potential revenue in the satellite industry is literally astronomical. Even if satellites existed, as we, the public, are told. However, consider this. There are none at all legitimate, authentic photographs of any satellites in space. That's right. It doesn't exist. What if satellites really do not exist, literally, but companies are paying tremendous amounts of money to have their satellites launched into orbit, all the while the precious item they are counting on, literally banking on to advance their effectiveness and global reach, does not even exist. They would be paying a lot of money for their satellite to be built that never was. Then they're paying a large fee to have the item that never existed shot into space that also doesn't exist. Now back at headquarters, their communication systems are in full swing, just as the satellite manufacturer sales rep had told them that they could expect, just as it was shown them in the brochure. However, if the brochure were reflecting a factual account of the communications products, you would not see any pictures of satellites in space. You would only see the sea. That is, you would see the ocean. And on the bed of the ocean, you would see a massive band of underwater cables that span from continent to continent on the bottom of the ocean's floor. This is the reality of where over 85% of the world's information is traveling. Kind of strange, huh? Huge cables underwater transmitting all of our internet? What the heck are all those thousands of satellites doing then? Well, my friend, if you can handle reality, I'll tell you. Nothing. Nothing is what satellites are doing, because they do not exist except in our minds. Hello everyone, good day. Thank you for stopping by my channel. I appreciate you joining me. Give me a little coffee real quick. You gotta check this out though, right? To the moon and back. Astronauts to the moon. Anyways, let me get me some coffee. Then we're gonna talk about space. The final frontier. The never frontier, perhaps. So this is my mother's basement. Just wanted to show that off. She hates when I leave the candles on. Oh no, I'm spilling my coffee because I'm too funny. So this is about satellites. And do they exist? What do you mean, do satellites exist? Of course they do. I mean, I've heard about them all my life. Of course they exist. I've heard about Bigfoot all my life too, though. Have you ever seen a satellite? No, you have not. We're going to look into satellites. We're going to look into satellites. This is only the beginning. The lies they have told us all our lives, and the matrix they have wrapped around our minds and told us it was reality. We are tearing it down, uno, poquito, poquito, one by one, little by little. We are setting you free. Praise be the Most High God. Stay tuned, subscribe, like and share, because we are coming back. See you in the kingdom.